The desert moon of Arvani was quiet under its pale twin suns. The human explorer Ethan walked alone across the cracked soil, his boots leaving small marks in the sand. He had been searching for signs of a downed signal he had picked up on his ship's scanner. Most of the time, those signals led to empty wreckage, just metal scattered across the ground, stripped by scavengers. But something about this one felt different. The signal was weak, almost fading, like a heartbeat struggling to continue. Ethan followed it, his small tracker blinking in his hand. He reached the edge of a shallow canyon. Below, half buried in dust, lay a transport vessel. Its hull was dented and smoke rose from a broken vent. The ship was not human design. Its surface curved like bone, with lines shaped like flowing rivers. Ethan crouched, studying the marks. He recognized the pattern. It belonged to a species known as the Vulpine, a fox-like people who were proud, swift, and fiercely protective of their honor. Ethan hesitated for a moment. The Vulpine were not enemies of humans, but neither were they close friends. They kept to themselves, guarding their clans and their ways. Still, the signal was a distress call. Ethan's own code of honor would not allow him to ignore it. He slid down into the canyon, careful to avoid loose rocks. His hand rested on the sidearm at his belt, not out of fear, but caution. Inside the broken vessel, the air smelled faintly, of smoke and iron. Panels sparked as he moved through the narrow corridor. He called out, his voice echoing, "Hello? Anyone alive?" There was a faint sound like a growl or hiss coming from the far end. Ethan raised his light. In the corner of the cabin, behind an overturned chair, he saw movement. A pair of bright, golden eyes reflected the beam. A small figure crouched there, ears pinned back, tail coiled tightly around her body. It was a Vulpine girl. Her fur, no, not fur, but soft white skin with faint markings like delicate brushstrokes, glowed pale under the light. Her long hair fell in tangled strands around her face, and her sharp ears twitched at every sound. She wore a torn travel cloak, stained with smoke and dirt. Her claws dug into the metal floor as she watched him like a cornered animal. Ethan kept his hands visible. "Easy," he said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you." The girl's voice came out low, sharp. "Stay away. I'm not your pet." Ethan froze. He realized how it must look, a human standing over her while she sat cornered in her broken ship. He lowered himself to one knee to seem less threatening. "I know," he said gently. "You're not anyone's pet. You're hurt, aren't you? I can help." She hissed again, but her body trembled. Ethan noticed a wound on her leg, a shallow cut but enough to weaken her. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. She collapsed back, clutching the chair for support. "Let me get you out of here," Ethan said. "This ship won't hold much longer. The reactor might give." The girl's golden eyes narrowed. She wanted to resist. Vulpine pride burned in her voice. "I don't need your help." But her words cracked with weakness. Ethan did not argue. He stepped closer slowly, watching for any sudden move. He pulled a small pack from his belt and laid it on the floor within her reach. Inside was water, dried fruit, and a medical patch. "You don't have to trust me," he said, "but you need strength, take it." For a long moment she stared. Then, with trembling hands, she reached for the water. She sipped, never breaking eye contact with him. Her throat moved as she swallowed. She took a breath, steadier now. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "Nothing," Ethan said. "I couldn't walk past without helping." Her ears twitched. She seemed to study him, as if measuring the truth of his words. Finally, she spoke again, her voice softer but still sharp. "My name is Lyra." Ethan nodded. "Lyra. Good. Let's get you out of here." He helped her to her feet. She resisted at first, hissing again when his hand brushed her arm, but her strength gave out quickly. He steadied her, supporting most of her weight. Together, they stumbled through the broken corridor, past sparking wires and cracked panels. Outside, the desert wind whistled, carrying dust into the sky. Lyra's ears flattened against the sound. She swayed, pressing closer to him without meaning to. When she realized, she pulled back slightly, baring her small fangs. "Do not think this means I belong to you." Ethan almost laughed but kept his face serious. "I wouldn't dare think it. You belong to yourself." She gave him a strange look, as if his words were unexpected. They reached his small shuttle, parked on the ridge. He opened the hatch and guided her inside. The cabin was plain but clean, a human design with simple seats and basic supplies. Lyra glanced around suspiciously, her tail twitching. Ethan offered her one of the reclining seats. She sat stiffly, refusing to relax even as exhaustion weighed her down. He handed her another pouch of water and a small heating blanket. She took the water but pushed the blanket aside. "I don't need softness," she said, her voice almost defensive. Ethan sat across from her. "It's not softness, it's warmth, different thing." She gave a sharp little snort, like half a laugh she didn't want him to hear. Then she drank again, silent for a while. Outside the shuttle, the desert grew darker as the sun set. Ethan checked the instruments, making sure the ship's systems were stable. He planned to lift off at dawn, once Lyra had some strength back. He could take her to the nearest station where her people might find her. But as he glanced at her again, he noticed something. She had curled slightly to one side, her body trembling faintly. She fought sleep, her eyes flickering open whenever his gaze lingered. Pride kept her upright, but pride could not hide the exhaustion in her bones. Ethan leaned back, giving her space. He spoke softly. "Rest if you need to. I'll keep watch." Lyra's eyes narrowed. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came. For the first time since he found her, she looked less like a cornered animal and more like someone who simply needed safety. She whispered, almost too low to hear. "I am not your pet." "I know," Ethan said again. His voice was steady, calm. "You're Lyra. That's enough." Her golden eyes lingered on him for a long time, searching. Then, slowly, her head dipped forward. Sleep claimed her at last. Ethan stayed awake through the night, watching the desert through the glass, keeping his word. The strange bond between human and Vulpine had only just begun. The first rays of Arvani's twin suns crept over the horizon, painting the desert sky with pale gold. Ethan rubbed his eyes, stretching his tired arms. He had stayed awake through the night, listening to the whistling winds and the quiet hum of his shuttle's systems. His gaze drifted toward the corner of the cabin where Lyra rested. The Vulpine girl had slept lightly, her ears twitching at every sound, but exhaustion kept her still. At some point during the night, her tail had loosened and draped across her legs. She looked less fierce now, her sharp features softened by sleep. Ethan almost smiled but reminded himself to stay respectful. He didn't want her waking to find him staring. Lyra stirred just as he was preparing a simple meal from his ration pack. Her golden eyes blinked open, narrowing as they fixed on him. "You are still here," she said. Her voice was rough from sleep, but her tone carried the same sharpness as yesterday. "I said I'd keep watch," Ethan replied calmly, setting down a small tray. "Food's ready." Lyra's nose twitched at the faint smell of heated protein and spiced grain. She sat up slowly, pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders as if to shield herself. "I can provide for myself," she muttered. Ethan pushed the tray a little closer. "Maybe. But right now, you're wounded. Eat, regain strength. After that, you can prove you're stronger than me all you want." Her ears flicked back, and for a moment it seemed she would refuse, but her stomach betrayed her with a faint growl. Her golden eyes widened in embarrassment, and she reached for the food without another word. She ate quickly, with sharp, efficient bites. Ethan pretended not to notice her hunger, instead checking the shuttle's controls. "The nearest station is a few hours away by air. We can leave once you're ready." "We?" Lyra snapped, licking the last of the meal from her fingers. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Unless you plan on walking across 30 miles of desert with a leg wound, yes. We." Lyra hissed under her breath but said nothing. Pride burned in her, yet she could not deny her weakness. When Ethan guided the shuttle into the air, the desert stretched out beneath them, endless waves of red sand. Lyra sat stiffly in her seat, her tail wrapped tight. She glanced out the window but avoided looking at him. For a while, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the hum of the engines. Finally, Lyra spoke. "Why?" Ethan glanced at her. "Why what?" "Why help me? My people are not yours. You owe me nothing." Ethan thought for a moment. "Because you were in trouble, because you were alone. I wouldn't leave anyone like that." Her golden eyes narrowed again. "Humans always speak of kindness, but often it hides chains." Ethan kept his eyes on the horizon. "Then don't trust my words. Trust my actions." Lyra looked at him for a long time, as if measuring something unseen. She didn't answer, but she did not argue again. Hours later, the shuttle landed near a small oasis settlement, a cluster of stone huts and tents built around a pool of water. Traders and wanderers moved through the dusty streets, their voices rising in many tongues. Ethan guided Lyra through the settlement, offering his arm for balance. She hesitated, her pride warring with her need, but finally leaned just enough to steady herself. The settlement's healer, an older woman with kind eyes, patched Lyra's wound properly, cleaning and sealing it. Lyra hissed at the sting, but endured it without complaint. Ethan watched quietly, admiring her resilience. Afterward, they found a shaded corner near the water. Lyra sat with her cloak wrapped tightly, her tail brushing the sand. She watched the people around them with sharp suspicion. "They look at me," she muttered. "They look at everyone," Ethan said. "You're not the only outsider here." Lyra's ears twitched. Outsider. She spat the word softly, as if it carried too much weight. Ethan studied her. "You've been alone a while, haven't you?" Her golden eyes flicked to him, then away. "It is not your concern." "Maybe not," he said. "But I know what it feels like." She tilted her head, ears rising slightly. "Humans. Alone?" Ethan gave a small, sad smile. "Happens more often than you think." For the first time, Lyra didn't respond with anger. She looked at him differently, curiosity softening her sharpness. She hugged her knees close, resting her chin there. As the suns began to dip, Ethan suggested finding shelter. They rented a small room in a stone inn, barely large enough for 2 sleeping mats and a table. Lyra paced the room, restless. "You chose this room," she said accusingly. "Small, easy to trap me." Ethan laughed softly. "It was the only one left, but if you want, you can sleep by the door. That way no one can come in without you knowing first." Her ears flicked. She seemed almost surprised at his offer. Without another word, she sat near the door, cloak wrapped around her, tail tucked close. The night was quiet except for the distant voices outside. Ethan tried to sleep but soon noticed movement. He opened one eye. Lyra had shifted in her spot. She sat with her arms wrapped around herself, ears drooping slightly. The desert night had grown cold, colder than she had expected. She shivered, trying to hide it, her tail trembling around her legs. Ethan said nothing at first, respecting her pride, but when her teeth chattered faintly, he finally spoke. "The blanket is still there," he said softly. Lyra's eyes flashed in the dim light. "I don't need—" she began, but her words broke off as another shiver took her. Ethan didn't move closer. He simply spread his own blanket across the mat and leaned back. "Suit yourself, but the cold won't care about your pride." For a long moment, Lyra sat frozen. Then, with a sharp hiss of frustration, she snatched the blanket and wrapped it tightly around herself. She glared at him as if daring him to laugh. Ethan only closed his eyes, pretending to sleep. Hours passed. The room grew colder still. Lyra shifted restlessly. Her instincts, strong and deep within her kind, pulled her toward warmth. She resisted, muttering under her breath, but exhaustion dulled her fight. Slowly, carefully, she moved closer. Ethan felt the faint brush of her tail before anything else. Then a soft weight leaned against him. Lyra had curled half against his side, her body trembling less now as the warmth spread. Her voice was a whisper, almost inaudible. "I am not your pet." Ethan kept his eyes closed, speaking just as softly. "I know." Silence followed. Her breathing slowed, steadying as sleep claimed her again. Ethan stayed still, careful not to break her trust. He understood what this moment meant. Not ownership, not weakness, but the first step of fragile trust between two very different souls. As the desert winds howled outside, human and Vulpine shared the same warmth, bound by circumstance and something far stronger beginning to grow. The morning light filtered through the cracks in the inn's stone walls, touching the room with a pale glow. Ethan opened his eyes slowly. He felt warmth pressed against him and turned his head slightly. Lyra was still curled beside him, her cloak half falling off, her golden eyes closed in sleep. Her ears twitched faintly as if she was dreaming, and her tail was wrapped loosely across her legs. Ethan stayed still for a moment. He didn't want to wake her too soon. For someone so proud, so defensive, it had taken a lot for her to let herself fall asleep near him. He knew if she realized she had been leaning against him, she might hiss again, maybe even snap. But he also knew this moment meant something deeper, trust beginning to grow, even if she didn't want to admit it. Lyra stirred, a short while later. Her ears flicked and her golden eyes opened. The first thing she noticed was how close she was to Ethan. She froze, then quickly pulled back, her face darkening with embarrassment and annoyance. "You," she started, her voice sharp. "Why did you let me?" "You were cold," Ethan said simply. "And tired, that's all." Her claws tapped against the floor as she turned away, tail flicking with agitation. "I told you," she muttered under her breath. "I am not your pet." Ethan gave a small smile but did not argue. "I know." Lyra stayed quiet after that, but her ears lowered slightly, a sign that her anger wasn't as strong as her words. They left the settlement later that morning. Ethan wanted to move toward the main station where he could find stronger supplies and maybe get Lyra proper passage back to her clan. Lyra, however, walked beside him with a wary look, her cloak pulled tightly. "Why go to your station?" she asked, her tail swaying behind her. "Because it's safer there," Ethan replied. "From there we can send word to your people. They'll know you're alive." Lyra's ears flattened. "My people will not be pleased." Ethan glanced at her. "Why not? Won't they be relieved?" Her golden eyes flicked to him, then away. "The Vulpine do not show weakness. To survive with a stranger, worse, with a human, they may see it as shame." Ethan walked in silence, for a moment thinking about her words. He understood pride, understood honor, but he also knew survival was no shame. "Then tell them the truth," he said finally. "You survived because you're strong. That's all they need to know." Lyra gave a sharp laugh, though it carried no joy. "Strong? You carried me, you fed me, you gave me warmth. Where was my strength?" "You're still walking beside me, aren't you?" Ethan said calmly. "That's strength." Lyra looked at him for a long time, her ears twitching, but she didn't argue. The desert journey wasn't easy. Heat pressed down during the day, and cold winds swept in at night. They moved cautiously, avoiding groups of raiders that sometimes appeared on the horizon. Lyra's wound slowed her, though it healed better each day with the healer's medicine. At night they rested near small caves or under rocky ridges. Lyra continued to keep her distance, sitting apart from Ethan, but each night she ended up closer, sometimes just a little, sometimes almost beside him. Pride made her hiss whenever he looked at her, yet her instincts always pulled her nearer. One evening, after a long day of travel, Ethan built a small fire in the shelter of a rocky wall. Lyra sat across from him, staring into the flames. Her golden eyes reflected the light, bright and sharp. "You were strange," she said suddenly. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Strange?" You do not treat me as prey. You do not treat me as enemy. But you do not treat me as pet either. I do not understand you. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe because I don't see you as any of those. I just see you as Lyra. Her ears flicked. She looked away, her tail curling tighter. Humans speak simply. Too simply. My people would not trust such words. Maybe, Ethan admitted. But sometimes the simplest words are true. Lyra stayed quiet for a long time after that, her eyes fixed on the fire, but her shoulders were less tense, and her tail no longer lashed the ground. On the 4th day of their journey, danger found them. They were crossing a narrow ridge when a group of raiders appeared from the rocks, 3 tall figures in scavenged armor, weapons raised. Ethan pulled Lyra behind him at once. "Stay close," he whispered. The raiders sneered, their voices rough. "Hand over your packs. And the girl." Lyra's ears flattened, her claws ready. "I am not." Ethan stepped forward, cutting her off. "You're not getting her, or our supplies." The raiders laughed and lunged. Ethan drew his sidearm, firing a warning shot into the ground. The blast echoed through the ridge. Dust flew and the raiders stumbled back in surprise. Ethan used the moment to grab Lyra's hand, pulling her down the slope. They ran together, feet pounding against the rock. The raiders shouted behind them, but Ethan knew these narrow paths better. He guided Lyra through winding turns until the voices faded in the distance. Breathless, they collapsed near a hidden alcove. Lyra's chest heaved, her golden eyes blazing. She turned to him, anger burning in her voice. "You put yourself in danger for me?" she hissed. "Why?" Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. "Because I wasn't going to let them take you, simple as that." Lyra shook her head, staring at him. Her tail lashed once, then stilled. "Humans are fools." "Maybe," Ethan said with a tired smile. "But sometimes fools are the ones who keep others alive." For a long moment, Lyra just stared at him. Then slowly, her ears lowered, and she whispered, "Thank you." It was the first time she had said those words. That night, they camped in a sheltered cave. Lyra sat beside him instead of across, her cloak brushing his arm. The fire crackled and the night wind howled outside, but inside the cave it felt warmer. Lyra spoke softly, almost as if confessing. "When I curled near you that night, I did not mean to. My body moved without my mind's command. It is instinct." Ethan nodded. "I know. Instinct keeps us alive." She looked at him with sharp eyes. "But instinct also shows weakness. To seek warmth. To lean close." Her tail twitched. Her voice grew quieter. "It is not our way." Ethan's gaze was steady. "Maybe it's not weakness, maybe it's trust." Lyra's ears twitched. She stared at him for a long time, searching his face. Then, without a word, she leaned slightly closer, her shoulder brushing his. The silence between them was not heavy, now. It was soft, almost comforting. The next morning, they continued toward the station. Lyra walked with more strength, her wound healing well. But something had changed between them. She no longer snapped at every word, no longer hissed every time he offered help. She still carried her pride like armor, but sometimes, when she thought he wasn't looking, she allowed herself small glances of curiosity, even warmth. Ethan noticed, but he didn't say anything. He knew this bond was fragile, growing like a small flame that could be blown out with a careless word. Instead, he walked beside her in silence, letting the journey itself build the bridge between them. For Lyra, every step was a battle, not against the desert, not against raiders, but against herself. Against the pride that told her she should stand alone and the heart that whispered she didn't have to anymore. And though she hissed again that evening, "I am not your pet," her voice lacked the sharp edge it once held. This time, Ethan only smiled. "I know," he said gently. "You're Lyra, that's all you'll ever need to be." And for the first time, Lyra didn't argue. The station finally came into view on the horizon. It stood like a small fortress in the desert built from stone and metal, its walls painted white to reflect the suns. Tall towers rose above it, with banners fluttering in the wind. From afar, it looked peaceful, but Ethan knew stations like this always carried hidden tensions. Merchants traded here, wanderers rested here, but so did spies, smugglers, and soldiers from many worlds. Lyra's golden eyes studied the structure with unease. Her ears tilted back, her tail swaying in agitation. "Too many eyes," she muttered. Ethan gave a small nod. "Yes, but it's safer than the open desert." She said nothing, but her body stiffened as they approached the gates. Guards in plated, armor-checked travelers asking questions and recording names. When it was Ethan and Lyra's turn, the guard raised an eyebrow. "Human traveler and a Vulpine?" Ethan kept his tone calm. "We're passing through. She was injured. I gave her aid." The guard's eyes lingered on Lyra. She stood tall despite her wound, ears erect, gaze steady. But Ethan noticed her, claws flexing against her cloak, a silent warning. Finally, the guard waved them through. "Don't cause trouble." Inside, the station bustled with life. Traders called out their wares, offering fruits, fabrics, and strange machines. The air was thick with spices and dust. Lyra kept close to Ethan, her golden eyes darting at every sound. She hated being surrounded, he could tell. For someone raised in wide-open lands, these narrow streets and constant voices felt like a cage. They found shelter in a quiet corner inn, this one larger than the last. Ethan booked a room with 2 mats, a table, and a small window overlooking the market. Lyra stood near the window, her tail twitching. "Why bring me here?" "So your people can find you," Ethan replied. "I'll send word through the stations." "Relay." Lyra turned sharply, her eyes flashing. "No." Ethan frowned. "No?" "They will think I am weak," she said, voice tight. "They will say I should have died with honor rather than live with a human's help." Ethan stepped closer but kept his voice gentle. "Lyra, they'll just be glad you're alive." "You do not know my people," she snapped. Her claws tapped the windowsill. "Pride is everything." He didn't answer at once. He could see the conflict in her, the way her ears lowered even as her tail lashed in anger. She was afraid, not of him but of what her own people would say. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "Then what do you want to do?" Lyra turned from the window, her golden eyes fierce. "I don't know." That night, the station grew noisy with the sound of merchants and travelers. Ethan and Lyra sat at the table sharing a meal. Lyra ate slowly, her ears twitching at every voice outside. Suddenly, the door burst open. 3 Vulpine warriors stood there, their cloaks deep red, their ears sharp and proud. Their golden eyes burned as they fixed on Lyra. "Found you," the one in front said. His voice was low, filled with authority. "You shame us, Lyra." Lyra froze. Her tail curled tightly, her claws clenched. Ethan rose quickly, moving between her and the warriors. "Easy," he said. "She's hurt. I saved her life." The leader's eyes narrowed. "Saved? Or captured?" His gaze flicked to Ethan with open disdain. "Humans are tricksters, we know their ways," Lyra hissed suddenly, stepping forward. "He did not capture me." Her voice rang sharp. "He gave me water, he gave me food, he carried me from fire and cold. Without him, I would be dead." The warriors looked at her, shocked at her outburst. One muttered, "Still, you leaned on him. A Vulpine leaning on a human." Lyra's ears flattened. "I leaned because I chose to live. Better shame than death." The leader growled, stepping closer. Ethan held his ground, though his hand twitched toward his weapon. "If you want to fight," Ethan said calmly, "you'll have to go through me first." Lyra looked at him, startled by his words. Her golden eyes widened. The leader sneered. "You think you can stand against us, human?" Ethan didn't blink. "If I must." The tension thickened. For a moment, Ethan thought blades would flash, but then Lyra moved between them, her arms outstretched. "No," she shouted. Her voice shook but carried strength. "He is not my captor. He is not my master. He is my companion. The warriors froze. The room fell silent. Ethan felt his heart thump. Lyra's words weren't just defense, they carried meaning. The leader's eyes narrowed. Do you claim this, Lyra? Before your kin? Lyra stood tall, though her body trembled. Yes, I claim it. The warriors lowered their weapons but did not hide their disdain. We will take you back, the leader said coldly. But your choice shames the clan. Lyra's ears drooped slightly. Her voice softened. Perhaps, but my choice is mine. Ethan watched her, pride stirring inside him. She had spoken with courage, even if it cut against her people's ways. The warriors turned, muttering among themselves, and left the room. The door slammed shut, leaving silence behind. Lyra sank onto the mat, her body shaking. Ethan knelt beside her. You did well, he said quietly. Her golden eyes shimmered with conflict. They hate me now, my own people. They don't hate you, Ethan said gently. They just don't understand. Lyra looked at him, searching his face. And you, do you understand? Ethan smiled faintly. I don't know everything about your people, but I understand you're strong enough to speak for yourself even when it hurts. Her ears twitched, and for the first time, she let out a small laugh. Soft, almost like a sigh. Strange, human. Later that night, the room was quiet again. Lyra sat by the window, gazing at the stars beyond the station's walls. Ethan rested on the mat, half watching her. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. When I said you were my companion, I did not plan those words. They came without thought. Ethan sat up slightly. Do you regret saying them? Lyra turned her head, her golden eyes glowing in the dim light. No. She paused. But it frightens me. Ethan's voice was calm. Why? Because it feels true, she whispered. Her tail curled closer around her legs. And truth is harder than lies. Ethan stood and walked to the window. He looked out with her at the stars. Then let the truth be what it is. No need to fight it tonight. Lyra stared at him for a long time. Then slowly, she leaned her head against his shoulder, just for a moment, just long enough to breathe. Ethan didn't move, didn't speak. He simply let her rest. By morning, the station buzzed with rumors. News spread fast, about the Vulpine girl who had returned alive, about the human she defended, about her bold words. Ethan knew this would not end here. More challenges would come. But as he looked at Lyra, walking beside him with her golden eyes sharp but calmer than before, he knew she had already made her choice. She still hissed when others stared too long. She still snapped when he tried to carry more than his share. But she stayed near him, her tail brushing his side as they walked. And when he teased her gently, "You're not my pet, I know," she gave him a look both fierce and soft. "No," she said firmly, "I am not your pet." But then, with the faintest smile tugging at her lips, she added, "I am Lyra, and you are Ethan. That is enough." The sons of Arvani were sinking low when the call came. Word had spread through the station about the human and the Vulpine girl, and it did not take long for more of her kin to arrive. This time, it was not only a few warriors, it was a whole clan delegation. Their cloaks carried the crest of her people, sharp patterns of red and silver that gleamed under the light. They walked with the pride of hunters and the authority of leaders. Ethan and Lyra were summoned to the station's council hall, a wide chamber with stone pillars and banners from many worlds. Merchants, travelers, and guards gathered along the edges to watch. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. The human who sheltered a Vulpine girl, and the girl who spoke for him against her own kin. Lyra walked beside Ethan, her ears tilted forward, her tail stiff with tension. Her golden eyes were sharp, but he could see the tremble in her hands hidden beneath her cloak. She was afraid, but not of battle. She was afraid of the judgment of her people. The clan leader, An older Vulpine with silver streaks in his furred ears stepped forward. His voice carried through the chamber. Lyra, daughter of the clan, you vanished in battle. We thought you dead. And yet here you stand, alive, with a human at your side. Whispers spread through the crowd. Lyra lowered her head slightly but did not hide. Yes, she said firmly. I survived. Because of him. The leader's golden eyes narrowed. You admit this openly? That you leaned on one not of our kind? Lyra's claws flexed. Her tail lashed once, then stilled. Yes, I admit it. Without him, I would be gone. He gave me water, food, and shelter. He carried me through cold and fire. He did not bind me. He did not command me. He only treated me as me. The hall grew silent. Ethan stood at her side, quiet, letting her speak. He knew this moment was hers. The leader turned his gaze to Ethan. And you, human, why? Ethan met his eyes without flinching. Because she needed help. That's all. I didn't think of honor or pride. I thought of life. The leader studied him for a long time. Then, with a sharp tone, he said, You risk much, human. Do you not fear us? Do you not fear that your kindness will cost you dearly? Ethan's voice was steady. Fear doesn't stop me from doing what's right. A murmur ran through the hall. Some looked impressed. Others looked ready for anger. Lyra stepped forward again, her ears high. You call me weak because I lived. But I tell you this, weakness is not asking for warmth. Weakness is refusing to see truth, and the truth is this. This human is not my master, not my pet keeper. He is my companion. I choose that word myself. Her declaration rang like steel. Ethan felt his chest tighten. She was standing against everything she had been taught, for him, for them. The leader's eyes softened slightly, though his face remained stern. You speak boldly, Lyra, perhaps too boldly, but your spirit is strong, and strength is the only thing that matters in the end. He turned to the warriors. Lower your weapons. The warriors obeyed, though their glares stayed fixed on Ethan. The leader looked back at Lyra. Your path will not be easy. Many in the clan will scorn you for this choice. But you live, and life is its own victory. Go then. If you claim him as companion, then stand by it. Lyra bowed her head slightly, relief flickering in her golden eyes. When they left the hall, the crowd outside buzzed with whispers. Some mocked, some admired, but Lyra walked tall, her cloak trailing behind her. Ethan followed, watching her with quiet pride. As they reached the edge of the station, Lyra finally let out a long breath. Her shoulders slumped and she leaned against the wall. It is done, she whispered. Ethan gave her a small smile. You were brave. She shook her head. Brave? No. My heart shook the whole time. That's what bravery is, Ethan said gently. Doing it anyway. Lyra looked at him, her golden eyes softer than ever before. Her ears lowered, not in shame, but in calm. Strange human, she said again, but this time, her voice carried warmth. That night they sat outside the station, away from the noise. The desert stretched under the stars, quiet and endless. Lyra sat close, her tail curled around her legs. I never thought I would say this, she admitted softly. But I am glad I met you. Ethan chuckled. Even if you hiss at me half the time? Her ears flicked, and for once a smile tugged at her lips. Maybe more than half. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind. Then Lyra shifted slightly, curling closer until her head rested near his shoulder. Her body trembled faintly, not from cold, but from the weight of all that had happened. I am not your pet, she whispered, the words automatic now, like a shield she still held. I know, Ethan replied softly. You never were. She closed her eyes, her tail brushing against his side. But I am Lyra, And you are mine. Ethan's chest tightened at her words. He did not answer right away. He simply placed his hand lightly over hers, letting silence speak for him. The stars shone brighter above, the desert quiet around them. For the first time since their journey began, Lyra looked peaceful. In the days that followed, they prepared to leave the station. Lyra had a choice: return fully to her clan or continue with Ethan. The clan had left the decision in her hands, though not without their judgment. On the morning of their departure, Lyra stood at the station gates, her cloak fluttering in the wind. Ethan adjusted his pack, glancing at her. "So, what will you do?" Lyra's golden eyes fixed on him, steady and sure. "I will walk with you." Ethan blinked. "Are you sure? It might mean leaving your clan behind." Her tail swayed slowly. "I carry my clan in my blood. No one can take that but you. You gave me something they could not, a choice, and I choose this." Ethan smiled, his chest warm. "Then let's go." They stepped out into the desert together, side by side. The suns rose high, casting their long shadows across the sand. Lyra glanced at him, her golden eyes shining. "Strange human," she said once more, her voice carrying both affection and mischief. Ethan laughed softly. "Proud, Vulpine, and..." As the wind carried their footsteps away, it was clear that whatever lay ahead, raiders, deserts, or even the disapproval of her people, they would face it together. Not as master and pet, not as savior and captive, but as companions. Perhaps even something more waiting to grow under the stars.